Very nice to have a chance to be with you all today. And so glad that you had a chance to connect with my wife over the last few weeks. So definitely very helpful. We have a very different take and approach to our meditation practice. That's been something that was interesting, living in a meditation community for a long period of time, being around other people who were really passionate also about their meditation practice, and seeing how incredibly different we all were and what incredibly different approaches we took to our practice was interesting, because there's a teaching, for example, never to be determined to never waste even a moment of your precious human life. So I meditated on that a lot when I was getting started. And for me, coming from an IT background, I'm like, okay, hyper efficiency. I'm not going to waste a moment. We're going to get a lot of stuff done. But for other people, you can take that as, no matter where I am, no matter what's going on, no matter what the situation is, I'm not going to waste this moment. I'm going to savor it, right? So you can take that meditation as like an injunction to, work hard and so forth, or you can, and that's, that can be beneficial motivation, or you can take it as an injunction to just savor deeply and enjoy deeply every moment that we're alive, right? But either way, it's still a practice. And so the point with any meditation practice is that we're stretching our mind. We're building a strength and flexibility in our mind, moving in a direction where adding conscious energy really helps us to make changes internally. Normally, when we are when we're applying energy to something, like working hard at something, that can be the basis for discipline and getting things done and so forth. But there are also some consequences and some risks to pushing ourselves, and we can get ourselves tied in knots, so to speak. Like the more we try, the more we struggle, the more we fight, the more we get tied in knots. And the traditional analogy is like an animal caught in a snare. So if an animal gets its leg caught in a snare, the more it struggles, the tighter the snare gets, right? And so you can understand the importance of intelligence, right? So that sometimes if you've ever encountered an animal who's been trapped, or even an insect, sometimes you can see, oh, I just wish they were a little smarter, right? A moth, don't fly into that flame. What are you doing? A bird, don't fly into that window. What are you doing, right? And so you can see there's a little bit of intelligence that's needed. Sometimes we need to try harder, push harder. Sometimes we need to relax. And when you can relax, if imagine an animal whose leg is caught in a snare, when you relax a bit, that lets the snare relax. That helps to untie. And so similarly, in our own approach, while there's benefits to being disciplined, working hard, and so forth, sometimes what I'll discuss today is just about how we create a sense of self when we're doing that. We create a very strong sense of what is the conflict that we're stuck in? Who are we? What's going on? What are we struggling for? What are we trying to accomplish? And the more we work, sometimes the more tightly we can hold that belief. Sometimes the most important thing is just relaxing a bit and developing a more open view and letting go of who we think we are and what we think the challenge is that we're facing. This is applicable in work. It's applicable in meditation, etc., etc. Okay, so as usual, we can take some time to settle in with some meditation, and I'll guide us through some meditation on this topic, but then explain it a bit more fully as we go through as well, or afterwards as well. So as usual for our meditation, we can find a comfortable position. Again here, the idea is balance, having a back that is upright or straight, but relaxed. And even that, it's It's an interesting balance. It's said to be like tuning the strings on a musical instrument, not too tight, not too loose. Too tight might break, too loose won't generate nice music. So that is the description of holding our back, but it's also the description of holding our attention. Not too tight, not too loose. We can take a deep breath in and out, just allow ourselves to reset. Another breath, inviting ourselves to relax. Another breath, just asking ourselves what is important now. In a world of infinite information, what is finite and rare is our own attention. So our attention is more valuable than money, more valuable than information, knowledge, anything else. So we learn through meditation how to control our attention. We bring our attention to our body. Just noticing the feeling of sitting, feeling in our feet, legs, bottom. Feeling up through our belly and our chest. Feeling down through our arms into our hands and fingers. And through our shoulders and neck. Up into our face and head. Notice in particular if there is tension in our face or our head. In our eyes or our jaw. We ask ourselves why does our body tend to become tight and tense when we're stressed? What are we holding on to? What are we achieving through that tension? hard to see what practical purpose such tension plays. But perhaps it gives us some sense that we are doing something. Perhaps it gives us some place to direct the energy and intensity of our struggles. Perhaps it helps us to remember that we are struggling. And as we relax, we ask ourselves, is anything changing outwardly in my life when I relax? As we relax, we may feel our breath more deeply through our body. We may even feel our breath moving through our hands and fingers, some very faint change of feeling as we breathe in and out. Our body relaxes, and our breath can move more freely inside. Different knots and areas of tension can naturally soften and unwind throughout our body. We can reflect that this body is a collection of trillions of cells, each of which is based on genetic material that comes from our parents, nourished by food and water, that has come through the work of thousands or millions of people, directly or indirectly, come from the earth, sun, water, sky, that the whole universe has somehow converged directly or indirectly to give rise to this precious human life. It is ours for only a short time. We can regard it as a miracle, precious. A sign indicating the kindness of others. Even our thoughts We come from our society, friends, teachers. They recombine in unique ways within our experience. The raw components come from our language, paradigms and assumptions in our society. Since everything we have comes directly or indirectly from others, we can develop a feeling of warmth and gratitude and wish to repay the kindness that we've received. And with this good motivation, we can allow our attention to come back to this space, open our eyes, and as we're ready, arise from our meditation. So this question of within our body, within our experience, why do we accumulate some tension? Is an interesting one. I've mentioned in the past how I periodically get headaches, or somewhat regularly get headaches. One of the things that I noticed a long time ago is that if I had a strong headache coming on, but then I ended up teaching a meditation class, the headache would just go away magically while I was teaching the meditation class. I wasn't sure why. I came to the conclusion that it was because at that time I was focusing on other people instead of on myself. At that point, I had somehow forgotten about myself. And at least in my case, I think it tends to be some kind of a tension, like I'm turning the screws in my own sense of self, some stress, maybe arising, but that it can be relieved or released, for example, under the right circumstances, such as focusing on others instead of on myself. It's not a problem that I've completely untied, but it's an observation that I found really helpful, like the idea of gritting our jaw, like if there's some tension or feeling a little bit tense if you're in an awkward, uncomfortable conversation. It's just interesting how our body does that, and it feels like it's us trying to take that intensity and putting it someplace, right? This weekend I was listening to some teachings. I mentioned this many times now, but this book, Atomic Habits, the author, piggybacking a talk on some best-selling book is generally a winning strategy, but that's not my primary reason. His explanation is just very simple about how important it is for us to develop habits, how we always develop habits as an energy-saving technique, that it saves energy to not have to think about things. So the mind is always trying to make things habitual. So habits can work in our favor, or they can work against us. But the process of trying to build up a new habit gives us a little bit of insight into our own mind, and especially helps us get some insight into how we can unwind some of our habits, unbuild some of these habits. He describes a 4-step framework, and sometimes I also think of it as a 3-step framework, but there is some cue or some trigger, something that you see, right? And then there's some attraction, something that you want, right? And then ideally, and then you take action, but ideally you make that action easy. So if you want to build up a positive habit, his framework is make it clear, so provide some reminder in your experience, make it attractive, give something that makes you want to pursue that, make it easy, reduce the barrier of conducting that activity, and make it satisfying or rewarding by sort of reflecting afterwards and enjoying that you've done that action. But that general pattern is always the way it works, right? We perceive something, there's some information, and then we perceive there's some value, there's something attractive that we want, and then we pursue it, right? And so our actions are always triggered in this sort of, at least, if you wanted to simplify it, you can think of it as 3 steps, right? Perceiving something, valuing something, or being attracted to it, and then carrying out an action, some flow or activity. But there's another step that happens after that, which is that when you do something, it begins to define your identity. So one example is, like, if you run, that's what makes you a runner, right? If you cook, that's what makes you a cook. If you write, that's what makes you a writer. So our sense of identity is actually formed by the actions that we undertake, for better or for worse. And many of these actions are just habitual. And so, whereas there is an extraordinarily strong unspoken belief that, well, no, it is also it's a very much a spoken belief, but that we exist and that we are somebody, like there is some person here. But this collection of 4 trillion cells, right? From the point of view of physics, there is no self, right? It's just a bunch of atoms of various kinds. Right? From the point of view of chemistry, there is no self. It's just a bunch of molecules interacting in different ways. From the point of view of biology, we could see this, yes, we hold together and there's some homeostasis, but each of our cells is actually autonomous in their own ways. Not that they can survive on their own, like a blood cell can't go off and try to make it on its own. But good luck, buddy. Right, a little bit delicate, really highly adapted to a particular environment. A liver cell can't survive on its own. But each cell is kind of autonomous. It's got a job to do. It's got its own metabolism, takes in nutrients, puts out waste. Some cells reproduce themselves, and cells can die and be damaged and can attack each other and so forth. So the body can readily be viewed as a colony, like a coral, right, of trillions of cells of different kinds, including brain cells, process information. From the point of view of information technology, humans are just information processing systems. Take in data, store data, process data, output lots of words and stuff. But there's an extraordinarily strong sense that we exist, right? And as storytelling primates, right, there's an us, right? And I keep saying I, we. So it's in our language. We can't express things without that. But that self is a story that performs a useful purpose when communicating with others, and also gives a sense of singularity, right? Gives a sense of singularity to our identity. And singularity is like concentration, like when a group of people act together in unison, right? It's very powerful. If they're acting in a very disjointed way, not so powerful. If you think about the power of a tornado, right? Tornadoes gather this cycle of wind into smaller and smaller area. Has incredible power, right? Tornado. The winds of the same speed, moving at a greater distance, or I should maybe say that amount of energy, if it was distributed over a wider area of space, it wouldn't have a great destructive power. But a tornado has this destructive power because it's concentrated. So the sense of I concentrates us and enables us to get things done. So a sense of self-esteem and determination and discipline. Or just a sense of addiction and craving, and all of these things have a strong sense of I, whether intentional, disciplined, cultivated energy, or unintentional, just habitual energy. They all have this really strong sense of I. And it's powerful, but we need to also understand that there's a tension that we're creating when we define ourselves in this way. And the definition that we have of ourselves is always made with respect to everybody else. Right? So just by defining yourself, you also implicitly, you're defining non-self, everything that's not the self. Right? So the stories that we tell ourselves, they set up a tension. Right? They set up a tension between our coworkers. I'm like this, they're like that. They set up a tension between our society. We should be doing this, but people are actually doing that. They also set up a struggle for survival. This story of the need to survive, and to possess. My wife recently found a new teacher, a Korean teacher, who one of the things he said recently is, if struggling to find the exact phrase, but if there is no mine, there is nothing that is not mine. If there's no mine, my stuff, there's nothing that is not mine. So mine implies not mine, right? They rise together. And we spend all of our time, trying to accumulate mine, my house, and so forth. But this teacher was advocating that if we really want to be greedy, we need to get rid of the sense of mine. Because at that point, there's nothing that's not mine. Everything. There's nothing that's not yours at that point. If there's no yours, then there's nothing that's not yours. It reminds me, right, of the European society's first encounter with Native American communities, where at least many of the Native American communities, as I understand it, didn't have any strong sense of property rights. Gladly welcome strangers into their village and share, and there's a saying that I saw on a bumper sticker recently: "The earth does not belong to us." I think it was like a Lakota Sioux saying, "The earth does not belong to us, we belong to the earth." But of course, Europeans brought with them very strong sense of property rights. And they showed up and they're like, "Who owns this land? I don't see any white people here. Let's take it for ourselves." And they start, carving up this land. And so one thing we can learn from that is just how things like property rights are an idea, right? And I'm not saying I don't consider myself the owner of these things, of various things, but it's important to understand how these ideas are built up, right? And how they become just part of an implicit part of the way we think about things. And it makes it very hard for us to give up anything. If there's a very strong sense of mine and the need to acquire and hold on to, it makes it very, very hard to give up anything. And so we experience a lot of pain as a result of trying to hang on to our reputation, for example. Sometimes onto our possessions, or the wish that we always need more and more and more. I mentioned in the past, one of my wife, my hobbies is walking in random people's neighborhoods and just enjoying their yards. And in addition to enjoying the beauty of their yards, we enjoy the thought that we didn't have to put in any energy to maintain them ourselves. Just think, these people have only one yard each. They have to work so hard to maintain it. We can enjoy all of their yards. We can enjoy all of their beautiful homes. And so for us, we find this a very clever strategy. So we continue to not put much energy into, we don't have a yard per se. But anyway, offering some of these ideas for your reflection, but in particular, this idea that the things we do, whether consciously or unconsciously, they build up a sense of self. And that sense of self always implies self versus other, and there tends to be some tension between these. And so if we notice some of the physical tension we hold on to, but also all of the conflict that we experience in life, it all arises from this story, right? This disputes over property boundaries. There's a line, a foot this way, a foot that way. So, it's a story someplace. And whether you tell that story or not, it's important to be able to gain control of the story so you can untell that story. That you can say, it's fine for other people to have this success instead of me. It's fine for them to have fame instead of me, or wealth instead of me. I don't need to have everything for myself. What self is there anyway? Is there really a self, or it's just this idea? And then this is what's called untying the self, unwinding the self, deconstructing ourselves. And this is what really frees us. You can discipline and effort and determination and plans can be very powerful and useful, but we need to hold them lightly, be able to unwind them. That's how we can really free ourselves and others from the trickiest conflicts, the hardest problems that we face. Okay, I take just a few minutes to reflect on this. Let's let this sink in for a bit. So again, just taking a deep breath in and out, allowing yourself to return to some state of peace. And bringing to mind the story of ourself. And then thinking, if there is no self, there is nothing that is not self. If there is no mind, there is nothing that is not mind. And then we can conclude with vision or imagination. What would it be like if we held our story of ourselves so lightly that we could make or unmake any version of ourselves? Undo conflicts just by changing our story, and help others do the same. And with this wish, we can arise from our meditation, but carry with us some wish to investigate our experience and check whether find confirmation of any of these things in our experience.